Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive into something we see all the time, but maybe don't think about enough: the interview. So, is it a noble art form? Or is it something much darker? Is it, as some of the world's greatest minds have claimed, actually a crime? And look, this is not a new debate. For like over 130 years, this has been the central question. Is an interview a noble pursuit of the truth? Or is it a fundamental violation of a person's privacy, of their very soul?
So you've got two camps, right? On one hand, people say it's the absolute best way we have to get a vivid impression of public figures. But on the other side, well, it's seen as a kind of theft, an intrusion that literally diminishes the person being interviewed, almost like you're stealing a piece of their soul.
And it's not just a theoretical thing. In fact, many of the most creative minds out there, the very people getting interviewed all the time, have expressed this really profound, deep-seated hatred for the whole practice. Take Rudyard Kipling, for example. Yeah, the guy who wrote The Jungle Book. His view was, well, it was extreme. He didn't just dislike interviews, he called them immoral, a crime. He said it was just as bad as a physical assault, cowardly, vile, and something you should be punished for. Wow. And he was not alone, not by a long shot. You've got V.S. Naipaul saying they actually wound people. Lewis Carroll, yep, that Lewis Carroll, had what he called a just horror of the interviewer. And get this, Saul Bellow said it felt like someone was putting thumbprints on his windpipe. I mean, these aren't just little complaints. These are visceral gut reactions. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. There's this fascinating twist, a bit of hypocrisy, you could say. Because Kipling, the same guy who called interviewing a crime, he interviewed Mark Twain. And H.G. Wells, who hated the whole ordeal, he went on to interview Joseph Stalin. So it seems like even its biggest critics couldn't resist being on the other side of the microphone. So if it can be this terrible assault, what makes a good interview? What does that even look like? To figure that out, let's turn to a real master of ideas, Professor Umberto Eco. We're going to see what happens when this form is used to its full, incredible potential. Now, Umberto Eco was an absolute academic heavyweight. I mean, a professor, a top scholar in semiotics and medieval history, and this was all before he became a global superstar with his massive novel, The Name of the Rose. The sheer amount of work he produced is, well, it's just staggering. So naturally, when you look at all that work, an interviewer had to ask the big question: how on earth did you find the time for all of this? And Eco's answer, it wasn't just a simple tip. It revealed this whole secret philosophy he had for using the empty spaces in life. He had a name for these moments: interstices. He basically said our lives, just like the whole universe, are mostly empty space, just little gaps in time. And the real trick isn't about finding more time. It's about learning how to use the little pockets of time that are already there. And he gave this perfect example to illustrate it. He told the interviewer, look, right now, you're in the elevator coming up to my apartment, and I'm here waiting for you. He said that little gap, that interstice, that's all the time I need. In that brief moment, an entire article can be born. Just amazing. But this incredible productivity, it wasn't just some clever time management hack. No, it was way deeper than that. It was all rooted in how he saw himself. And his primary identity, well, it wasn't what most people thought it was. Just think about his academic work for a second. At the time of this particular interview, he'd already published over 40 dense, serious, scholarly books of nonfiction. And the novels, the things everyone knew him for, just 5. I mean, think about that contrast. Over 40 academic books versus 5 novels. And yet, almost everyone saw him as a novelist. And that gets to the heart of it. The interviewer asked him, does it bother you that everyone thinks of you as a novelist? And his answer was yes. Because in his mind, he was a university professor. That was his job. Writing novels? That was just something he did on Sundays. His identity was with the academic world, not with some writer's club. And this identity shaped literally everything he did. Even his super serious academic books were praised because they read like a story. He would tell the story of the research, including all the dead ends and mistakes. He actually thought this was the reason he didn't even start writing novels until he was 50, and even then it was by accident. His day job already let him tell stories. Okay, so what does this whole deep dive into Eco's mind tell us about the power of an interview? It shows that it's not about trapping someone. It's about how a few good questions can unlock an entire way of thinking. So the interviewer then pivots and asks about the huge success of his novel. And we have to remember, this was a serious book. We're talking metaphysics, medieval history, tough stuff. And all the journalists and publishers were just baffled by its success because they were all working on this assumption that people only want to read, easy trash. And just look at these numbers. His American publisher thought, maybe we'll sell 3,000 copies. Instead, it sold 2 to 3 million in the US alone. That's not just a hit, that's a total phenomenon that completely broke all the rules. But Eco himself, he wasn't surprised at all. His explanation was actually pretty simple and really profound. He said, look, there are millions of people out there who don't want easy stuff. People actually crave a challenge. They want to be engaged, not just handed something simple. And this is where it all comes together. This is where we see what an interview can be. It's not an assault, it's not a theft, it's a real conversation that lights up a whole way of thinking about time, about who we are, and about what we as readers and thinkers are really looking for. So, I'll leave you with this question. A great interview for sure can reveal the soul of the person being interviewed, but maybe, just maybe, what we choose to watch, what we choose to read, and what we choose to believe from all those interviews, maybe that reveals even more about us.